Hi, we're back.
Reminding you it's TGIF.
That's mean thank goodness it's funny.
And stay tuned because Family Matters is coming up next.
You're gonna love it. It's all about our friend Harriet and her husband Con and their whole family. And this week, the fun really hits the fan
Falky, instead of telling them about it, why don't we let them watch it?
Can I watch too? Because I really love this one.
Yes.
That's a sound that greeted many viewers on Friday nights in the 90s. More specifically, on ABC's TGIF block. It's a sound that brings a wonderfully warm, cozy, nostalgic feeling, because it meant that an episode of Family Matters was off and running. If you're watching this video, chances are you're probably already a fan of Family Matters, or at least familiar with it in some way. But for the sake of context, let me quickly run down the show. Family Matters was a family-friendly sitcom about the Winslows in Chicago. Carl and Harriet are the parents, and their children included Eddie, Laura, and at one point, Judy Winslow. They had extended family members also in the household, with Carl's mother Estelle and Harriet's sister Rachel Crawford, along with her son, Little Richie. However, I'm leaving out one key character. It's the character who isn't even a part of the family, but he is basically the face of the show. I'm of course talking about Stephen Quincy Urkel. Jaleel White's nerd icon infamously took over the series. And with this breakout character, down the line, something happened with the show. It not only jumped the shark, it rocket boosted over it with incredibly over-the-top plots that pushed the sitcom into another genre entirely. So join us as we reflect on just what the fuck happened when Family Matters turned into a sci-fi show. So, many of you have probably seen the comedy sketch from Key and Peele that went viral several years ago. The brilliance of that sketch is that it brought to light an unspoken truth that 90s kids just accepted back in the day. In the sketch, Jordan Peele portrays Reginald VelJohnson as he storms into the office of an ABC vice president to complain about the plots of Family Matters episodes as they become too outlandish. The sketch itself turns dark and fantastical, with Jaleel White showing up, as portrayed by Tyler James Williams, and demonstrating his mind powers to lord over the show. It's a hilarious sketch, and as a Family Matters fan myself, I really appreciated it for taking that angle. All the episode details said in the sketch were made up, but it still had a point. It made me stop to think, yeah, they really did have some crazy-ass episodes for a supposed run-of-the-mill family show. How did Family Matters evolve in such a way? The series actually had an interesting journey since the beginning. Let's step in the Wayback Machine to go back to the spring of 1989. A couple of TV heavyweights had two primetime successes, with Full House and Perfect Strangers on Friday nights on ABC. These heavyweights are executive producers Thomas L. Miller and Robert L. Boyette. Miller and Boyette's resume would include such shows as Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Joni Loves Chachi, Bosom Buddies, and The Hogan Family, which featured a teenage Jason Bateman. They were a couple of mega powers at family-friendly programming. Disney CEO Bob Iger had become the president of ABC that year, and he had the notion to make a 2-hour block of sitcoms that could be enjoyed by parents and kids alike to rival all the dramas that the competition would air around that time. That block became TGIF, which normally stands for Thank God It's Friday, but Iger reworked it into Thank Goodness It's Funny. Perfect Strangers was already a big title for the network, but the show would more or less get reinvented when it moved its broadcast schedule to Fridays in its third season. One of the biggest changes came when a new primary location for the stories became the offices of the local newspaper where the two characters would work, the Chicago Chronicle. It's here where we meet a sassy new character named Harriet Winslow. This new supporting character was portrayed by Jo Marie Peyton France, and she played the building's elevator operator. Yes, an elevator operator. You wouldn't think that would be interesting enough to lead in her own show, but she became a fan favorite. She wasn't part of the main cast, but Harriet was a standout, as she appeared in over 30 episodes spanning 3 seasons of the show. They even expanded on her character, and audiences got to meet her cop husband, Carl Winslow. And this is when Reginald VelJohnson first stepped in his defining role.
So, Carl, you're closing in on a corrupt politician?
Yeah, I really want to nail this guy. And we're about to spring a trap for him and a big mob kingpin.
Larry and Banky's Waterworks, which drip do you want to talk to?
Harriet Winslow was popular enough that ABC decided to spin her off into her own series and focus attention on her family. Or at least, that was the initial plan. According to the creatives, when Family Matters got up and running, it didn't bring in the audience that they were hoping. Series co-creator Michael Warren had admitted that with each episode early in the show, they kept trying to find their footing, waiting to see what the show's groove would be. We had Harriet carry over from Perfect Strangers, but we also had Carl and his dynamic with his mother. A lot of times, the teenage son character would rise as the star of the show. So would the series hinge on the lovable doofus Eddie Winslow? Around episode 12 of the first season, the show would find its answer in the one-off character who fawned over Laura, the one and only Steve Urkel.
Hi, Mr. Winslow. I'm Steve Urkel.
Jaleel White was a child actor who had made the rounds in commercials and multiple attempts at TV shows. Prior to Family Matters, White made an impression in a guest spot on The Jeffersons, and was even featured as a student in the proto-pilot to Saved by the Bell, when it was Good Morning Miss Bliss. White was 12 years old when he came on to do his only intended episode of Family Matters, and according to the man himself, he found the Urkel persona first by doing a bad impression of Martin Short's famous Ed Grimley character. The Steve Urkel takeover was also seemingly instantaneous. White said that when he did his original guest spot episode, there was a group of frat guys in the audience that loved him so much that they chanted, "Urkel, Urkel, Urkel," during the scenes that he wasn't even in.
These are for you. Wow, are you wearing a bra?
The reaction was everything that the writers could ask for. Urkel was supposed to be the blind date from hell in his one episode, but the show signed Jaleel White immediately. And Warren even admitted that they filmed extra scenes with him to throw him into episodes that were already in the can, so they can get him on air even sooner. That's why he sort of randomly appears without a formal introduction if you binge watch the series nowadays. Family Matters found its hook, and history was made. Urkel saved the show from getting canceled, so he was their golden boy. It might be hard to illustrate just how big a cultural phenomenon Urkel was if you weren't there yourself. But fortunately, we have the internet to preserve a ton of content from yesteryear. Not only did he have a catchphrase and a personality that people could impersonate,
Now, you two guys put the ick in pathetic.
Steve Urkel's popularity was capitalized on by the network, not only by crossing him over into other ABC shows,
Honey, I'm home.
but he started his own dance craze called the Urkel.
Do the Urkel. Do the Urkel.
He had his own talking doll,
Let me introduce you to the Urkel doll. He's got my looks, my laugh, my voice, and all.
he had his own breakfast cereal,
I've got a great new cereal. Can I do that?
and he even got a bill passed through Congress. So, that clean air you're breathing, you can thank Urkel for that. Can we also just take a moment to appreciate that Jaleel White grew up with all this attention on him and came out of childhood stardom relatively unscathed? So, to be fair, Family Matters did a number of things outside the box before it truly went off the rails. As with many sitcoms, sometimes writers would experiment with the format or stories if they feel like changing things up. Some shows would dedicate entire episodes to dream sequences just to put characters in alternate realities. It's how Family Ties had Alex P. Keaton travel to 1776. That's right, Michael J. Fox had already time traveled prior to Back to the Future. Even workplace comedy like News Radio would go to space in a What If episode. So there is some precedent for oddball episodes. Like when Laura had a dream that Steve built an atom bomb and blew up Chicago.
Did I do that?
I think what helped us viewers not to notice too much was how gradual it was. We were willing to accept anything that happened due to slowly easing into the absurdity. So, here we go. Let's take a look at the evolution of Family Matters. It basically starts with the fact that not only is Steve Urkel a stereotypically smart nerd by high school standards, he's quite a genius and is an active inventor. Things start to get slightly elevated in Season 3, where there's an episode that features a robot that Steve built in his image called the Urkelbot. The Urkelbot's performance was incredibly convincing thanks to the breakdancing movements of Michael Boogaloo Shrimp Chambers, known for playing Turbo in the Break-In movies. In the episode, Urkelbot was a real working cybernetic android, but it became dangerous when it developed feelings for Laura and would stop at nothing to have her. They actually brought Urkelbot back later that season, where he was reprogrammed to be a police android, or, if you will, a robo-cop. Down the line, Steve would create some fantastical inventions that didn't seem too over the top, like a jetpack that sent him flying into the episode of Step by Step that took place right after Family Matters.
Did I do that?
The catalyst of the eventual Sci-Fi turn can arguably be pinpointed to the middle of the 5th season. There's a popular episode where Steve spent a week toying with his DNA and figured out how to change his genetics to make him cool. It's an obvious nod to the original Jerry Lewis Nutty Professor film, and this is where Steve Urkel was born. The night and day characterizations of Steve and Stefan blew fans away, and Jaleel White's acting should not go overlooked here as he seamlessly switches back and forth. Unfortunately, Stefan was flawed, and with his new suave genes also came incredible narcissism. Despite his shortcomings, Stefan was a big hit, and the writers wanted to bring him back. So, at the end of that very season, Steve invents the infamous Transformation Chamber. The chamber was a new way to change Steve into an improved Stefan. But it wasn't without its own bugs, and the change would still be temporary. However, that didn't stop the writers from going back to this plot device for multiple episodes. Multiple episodes. The Transformation Chamber would now become a gateway to crazier plots. Immediately, they followed up the Stefan Season 5 finale with a Season 6 premiere that featured a wacky mix-up mishap that accidentally turns Carl into Steve, the bane of his existence.
Did I do that?
Later that season, it would be revealed that Steve has DNA of famous people in his possession through his celebrity hair collection. This would give him carte blanche to turn into Albert Einstein, Elvis Presley, and Bruce Lee. He'd turn into Bruce Lee not just once, not twice, but 3 times. On the latter 2 occasions, he would even partner up with Carl transformed into Bruce Lee, as well as Little Richie and 3J as Little Bruce Lees. Jaleel's Bruce Lee impression is actually pretty well done, and he even matches his body type. Season 7 kicks off with the doozy. The writers decide to lean further into absurdity, and the premiere episode goes the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids route. Steve moves in with the Winslows, and with him also come his inventions. Carl and Steve are at the house about to meet up with the rest of the family, who have gone camping for the night. Unfortunately, Steve's transformation chamber malfunctions, and a beam of energy hits both of them, shrinking them down into the size of bugs. This episode is full of cinematic shots and special effects, which makes me wonder how the audience was able to watch this at a taping, or if there was an audience at all. You'd think if you had gotten to the point of shrinking your characters, you'd have already gone too far. But we're still just revving up. Over the course of the show, Steve would invent a love potion that made Laura fall in love with him. Steve would create a tornado inside of the Winslow household. Steve invents a time machine that sends him and Carl back to the past, in which Carl skewed the timeline into a new tangent. They even brought the time machine back for another episode. Time travel was actually normalized in the Family Matters world.
Oh, no way. No way am I going back in time with you. Last trip I took almost didn't get back.
Steve invented a teleportation pad that sent the family to Paris instantaneously. Steve developed a belt with a force field so Eddie could win a Tough Man competition. Steve built a working bioduplication machine that clones him, and the episode featured double the Urkel wackiness. So how do you even end a show like this? You send Steve Urkel to space. And the 2-part conclusion of the entire series, NASA enlists Steve's help on a mission, and he would naturally put everyone in danger. At one point, things get really dramatic when it looks as if our favorite sitcom nerd would float into the vast emptiness of the universe.
Without a tether, Steve will continue to float further and further away from Explorer, with no way to return.
God, I can't watch this.
Also, try to keep in mind that the episodes I'm referencing are the ones whose plots take place canonically within the reality that the Winslows inhabit. There are also a handful of episodes that play with the format and take place in a dream world or a nightmare world. Like the Halloween episodes where an evil Urkel ventriloquist dummy named Stevel comes to life and kills the family in unusual ways, including turning Harriet into a jack-in-the-box. And there she is, the original character that the show is based on. Whew. So, why did the writers go this route? From what I've been able to find, it all hinged on Steve's intelligence and Jaleel White's talent. Writers and producers Fred Fox Jr. and Stephen Langford admitted on the Delicious Culture podcast that with Urkel's capacity to invent things, coupled with White's physical and voice abilities, they could go wild with story concepts and do anything that they wanted.
Because Steve is so smart, that became almost a starting point for a lot of different stories. It allowed us to do a lot of things. It allowed us to do Stefan. It allowed us to do, just any number of things. So that his brilliance allowed us He's a very great story generator.
Even in non-high concept episodes, White would portray multiple characters, including a female Southern Belle Urkel cousin, and a hardened Urkel cousin who grew up on the streets.
Well, what does OGD stand for?
Original Gangsta Doll.
It's like when Conan O'Brien said that Mr. Burns was his favorite Simpsons character to write for, because he gave them the creative freedom to do whatever they wanted.
He's a comedy writer's fantasy. There's limitless potential for him. Because he has unlimited wealth, and he's as old as time, we could do anything we wanted. He could have chambers deep down underneath his house.
However, Family Matters didn't quite have the over-the-top space that an animated series like The Simpsons could have. At its core, Family Matters is still a show about normal people, and because of that, these outrageous episodes tend to give you some tonal whiplash. In one scene, Laura and Harriet are teaching little Richie that it's wrong to lie. Then they'll cut to the next scene where Carl and Steve are wrestling the Bushwhackers tag team. To this day, Family Matters is still a beloved show, and the cast is continuously given their flowers by fans. The Urkel phenomenon continued on, and Jaleel White even returned to voice his famous character in an animated feature from 2023 called Urkel Saves Santa the Movie. Revisiting the show as an adult has been a glorious experience, with all its nostalgia and strangeness. And sometimes I still have to ask myself if they really did that.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.